From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined, as always, with our super producer, Dylan, the Tennessee pal, Fagan. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Fellas, this is going to be dark water, not appropriate for all audiences. Maybe we start this way, as we're all film buffs. What is the most disturbing film you've ever seen? Not just in terms of like bad or disappointing, but something that genuinely bothered or haunted you.
8mm with Nicolas Cage. No, I'm kidding. It's not that disturbing. I scared the crap out of me when I was a kid, and it was my first introduction to snuff films. But another one that is very recent that I think I've pitched to y'all before is an incredible French-Canadian film called Red Rooms that absolutely modernizes the idea of snuff films and takes it to the dark web. And the central plot revolves around a trial of an individual who is accused of creating and selling these snuff films on the dark web. And it's actually a real internet parlance called Red Room films. And I highly recommend this film. It's not violent. Everything happens off screen, but that does not make it any less disturbing. It's one of the truly most chilling films I've ever seen.
And Matt, what's something, a film you saw that haunted or disturbed or stays with you in a bad way?
Are we talking about just fictional movies?
Just any piece of media that you consume, whether it be
any moving camera footage.
I think I don't know. I don't know if it's something we're going to talk about today, but the 9 minutes, 26 seconds of George Floyd.
Oh,
just watching that.
Absolutely.
And then being compelled to watch it, not only because you want to experience the thing and some kind of solidarity, but also because you can't look away.
Same.
But also, there's just,
it's state-sponsored murder.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, but to sit there and actually watch it for the length of it. Yeah.
Y'all will also, I'm sure, recall when there were a lot of, decapitation videos floating around from, terrorist groups and
cartels.
Yeah, cartels, et cetera. There was certainly a moment for that as well.
It continues today.
It sure does. Yeah. But I just remember a time where it was like, wow, this is just out there and, available.
Well, those are the days of Live Leak.
That's exactly right, Matt.
Exactly.
All that stuff just existed.
And gore forums, which also continue today. Films that I saw that disturbed me that were fictional are things like a Serbian film, Come and See, Requiem for a Dream. As you guys know, I had a terribly doomed double date to see that film without knowing what we were getting into. We went to Applebee's afterwards, which made the entire experience somehow more surreal and disturbing. Or it was a TGI Fridays. But the real life footage that we see all over the world, executions, assassinations, etc., the experts will tell us that those do not count for today's purposes. In tonight's episode, which may end up being a series, we're exploring the allegations that people, either as individuals or criminal organizations, have made films including genuine torture, defilement, and murder for the express purpose of profit. This is the fact and fiction surrounding things that are often called snuff films.
And if anybody did happen to catch that Nicolas Cage movie from the 90s, 8mm, the plot of that was this concept of real snuff films. And the idea that most of them, if not all of them, are faked, are more like torture porn, sort of, zhuzhed up to look as real as possible, kind of found footage, films, splatter, exactly. But then, of course, the twist of that is that he is searching for the creators of a potential real snuff film.
Please be aware, fellow conspiracy realists, this episode or episodes on this genre may not be appropriate for all listeners. We're going to pause for a word from our sponsors, and then we'll dive into how snuff films got into the zeitgeist. Here are the facts. All right, we're film, motion picture nerds, and you guys know way more than I do about most things. So it's correct that film has been around since the late 1800s, right? But the urban legend of a snuff film, true murder or torture for the express purpose of profit, that didn't gain public recognition until the 1970s, so way after the invention of film. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Popular examples would be things like Cannibal Holocaust, which we will get to a little bit later. This idea that some of these genre splatter films were potentially real, and even examples of the filmmakers using that as like a marketing tool, like not parading the cast, for interviews. Blair Witch Project is another example of that, though not snuff exactly, but I would say it occupies a similar space to what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's an excellent setup, because the rumor is that there was a clandestine network or multiple networks of murderers creating films showing in graphic detail genuine homicide, torture, and defilement. The story goes that these things had semi-professional production. They were made, like any other film, for profit. No ideology, no terroristic threats, just monstrous murder for a secret group of deeply disturbed, well-to-do customers. And it followed the same pattern as other urban legends. Everybody had heard of this. People might say they know someone who encountered one in real life, yet no one, when you drill down, had seen such a film for themselves. And to your earlier points, Noel, this urban legend, especially in the United States, gained huge prominence on January 16th, 1976, with the release of a film called Snuff, which, by the way, no offense, I'm not Siskel nor Ebert, but I think it's a skip. There are other things to watch.
For sure. And it is based loosely on the Manson murders of 1969, Cielo Drive and all of that. More recently dramatized to, frankly, with pretty hilarious results in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the kind of fictionalized alternate reality version of that. But that loomed large in the zeitgeist, in the public consciousness, and this was capitalizing on that. Snuff is what you would call a splatter film, a genre that is still alive and kicking today. It is you could argue that the Terrifier movies are splatter films. The whole point is to be as prurient and despicable and reveling in unpleasantness, torture, murder, and death. That is the feature, not the bug.
Yeah, I like that point. Yeah, in this film, to give you a sense of the plot as it originally stands, there is an actor named Terry London. That's the character. She is pregnant, and she and her producer and some friends visit an unnamed South American country. They run afoul, this is the Manson part, they run afoul of a guy named Satan, and Satan leads a female biker cult. Yeah, the cult stalks and murders the character Terry London along with her friends. It's gruesome, but it is not particularly unusual for its genre until the very end. In the last few minutes, the film breaks the fourth wall and the camera pulls away.
A man who appears to be the director, like you're seeing behind the scenes, starts to flirt with the female crew member. They begin to get into a little heavy petting as the crew continues filming. And then suddenly things take an incredibly violent turn.
So with the assistance of the rest of the crew, this guy who appears to be the director proceeds to torture, murder, and then disembowel the woman he was just kissing. The crew keeps filming, and so Snuff ends abruptly, and it looks as though the camera ran out of film stock. This was enormously controversial, but there's more to the story because Snuff gained attention for its marketing campaign. Its marketing campaign is a conspiracy. It blurs the line between fact and fiction, a predecessor, we could argue, in some ways, to the Blair Witch Project of 1999, which we talk about a little bit in an earlier episode of Ridiculous History with our pal, the journalist and author Ross Benish. So the story behind Snuff, is that a guy named Alan Shackleton, who is, I'll say it, in my opinion, he's kind of a sleazebag. He was associated with sexploitation films and very, low genre stuff, we could call it. He is a producer at the time. He buys the distribution rights for this, again, fictional film, Snuff. And he has also earlier read some articles in the newspapers about rumors of genuine snuff films being created in South America. Again, our definition being films made with real murder purely for commercial profit, not for ideological stuff, not for sexual gratification. So Shackleton reads this and it inspires him in a very dark way. He changes the ending of the film without the original director's knowledge. He adds that scene that Noel's describing there, and he sets out on this marketing campaign that purposely implies the homicide and torture depicted are real. They're very ambiguous about it, but they're leaning into it. The film bore a tagline when it released. It was this:
the film that could only be made in South America, where life is cheap.
Ugh. And Shackleton goes on to, as you mentioned, remove the credits from the film to add to the mystery. And then in a Bernays-style thing, he hires fake protesters to picket outside the theaters showing Snuff. It starts as a publicity stunt, and he is astounded that shortly thereafter, actual protesters begin picketing as well. People who are not in on the grift. It goes viral. Everyone from media pundits to politicians, journalists, concerned citizen groups, they weigh in. Obviously, thankfully, they're all condemning the film. But it doesn't take too long for journalists to figure out this is a work of fiction.
And I mentioned it earlier. I just want to double back really quickly. Cannibal Holocaust is another example of almost this same ploy. And I would argue it's probably inspired by that because this came out in 1980. It's an Italian splatter film directed by Ruggero Deodato. And it was so controversial, not only because of the graphic violence and frankly xenophobic, that at the time maybe wasn't as much of an issue, but it certainly didn't age well because of the way it treats indigenous people as like brutal, body devouring maniacs,
like Green Inferno.
Well, that was absolutely yes,
later.
100%,
yeah.
And those were very much inspired by Cannibal Holocaust. But when they did the marketing for it, they really leaned into this idea that it was real, and that the violence depicted in it was genuine, and did not have any of the actors participate in any of the marketing. And it was so controversial that I believe there was a lawsuit of some kind, or there was legal action being threatened against the filmmaker to the point where he had to reveal that these people were in fact alive, show proof of life to the authorities. So fascinating stuff. They did actually brutally kill a turtle though. So that did happen, and it's really gross and unclean.
And the water buffalo in Apocalypse Now was also killed on camera. This is another thing that echoes the pattern we see in larger urban legends. Without getting too meta, if we go back to Shackleton, we'll see that he purposely made ominous and cryptic statements in interviews. He was asked in Variety, amid the controversy about the film Snuff, whether the murder at the very end is real. And he simply responded, "If the murder was real, I'd be a fool to admit it. If it is not real, I'd be a fool to admit it."
Can't buy this kind of publicity, right?
That's what he's thinking, man. And so there's this public outcry that triggers an investigation by the authorities. The DA of the time in New York's district is a guy named Robert Morgenthau, and he dives in. He concludes the violence is fake, and he, like we were talking about with Cannibal Holocaust, he is able to confirm with local authorities in South America that the actor who appears to be murdered, tortured, dismembered has been found by local police, has been verified to be alive and well. And Morgenthau comes out and says, look, I don't see anything qualifying for criminal prosecution. This doesn't count as pornography. The marketing is misleading, but it doesn't count as consumer fraud. And then he goes on and he says, essentially, that he finds the whole thing pretty reprehensible, pretty icky, and he notes a serious concern which we see echoed today, said, even as a work of fiction, this film might encourage folks to commit real life violence against women. And look, we get it. This might sound like ancient history, 1976, almost half a century ago, but the public's morbid fascination with the urban legend of snuff films continues. So maybe now we try to separate some disturbing fact from fiction. Let's ask ourselves, are there real snuff films? Is someone out there committing murder on film purely for profit?
Well, we'll find out after a quick word from our sponsor.
Here's where it gets crazy.
Did you guys see the voicemail about this person, Lucifer Valentine? This is another filmmaker from the early aughts, I think, that created one of these disgusting films. It's got a horrible name to it. Slaughtered Vomit Dolls. It just looks horrifying. Somebody called in, Anu called in and let us know about it. And it's another one of these things that is meant to look real, almost like found footage of someone who is being kept alive and tortured and forced to do things, horrible things. And there are a lot of questions about who this person was. And maybe it's a story for another day, but it's someone who was trying to follow in the footsteps of a thing like we just talked about, Snuff, right? Who is trying to create something that it gets buzzed because it seems like it might actually be real. And some of the stuff depicted on it is real, but maybe not the actual death part, but the stuff.
The degradation stuff.
Yeah. The horrible things that lead up to it. So it just, it seems as though there's more of that out there, especially when you think about movies like Hostel that became so popular.
I don't care for torture porn.
I don't either.
You know what I mean? If it's not supernatural, then why am I watching it?
As I get a little older, just like really mean-spirited stuff like that, just kind of, I just can't do it. It does remind me as well of 1980s splatter genre series of films called the Guinea Pig films, one of which is called Flower of Flesh and Blood, and it is literally just a camera single-shot view of a guy dressed up as a samurai dissecting a woman who is alive, and she's just like, on this table. And there are others very much in this genre.
Yeah. A lot of weird stuff too in the Southeastern Asian sphere and East Asian sphere.
Apparently Charlie Sheen caught a glimpse of this film at a party or something in Hollywood, and he contacted the authorities because he thought what he was seeing was very, very real.
Jeez. Well, I guess what it shows us ultimately is that there is an appetite for this kind of thing, whether or not it's actually an appetite to watch true death, right? There are enough people. Hostel was a really popular movie, and there were sequels made, and it was that thing we're describing where it's just watching people die, right?
Right. There's a reason, I've said it before on the show, there's a reason people slow down at car accidents.
Yeah.
They want to see bad things happen at a remove or to other people. I mean, the answer to this conspiracy or this urban legend of snuff films, it really hinges on definition. The horror magazine Fangoria, did you guys ever read Fangoria?
I always flip through it when I go through a magazine store or Barnes & Noble or something like that. It's always interesting. Interesting photo layouts for sure.
I had a subscription.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
They describe snuff films probably with the best definition. A while ago, they said a snuff film is a film in which a person is killed on camera. The death is premeditated with the purpose of being filmed in order to make money. And we'll go back to that distinction again and again. They continue, oftentimes there is a sexual aspect to the murder, either on film or that the final project is purportedly used for some sort of sexual gratification.
And I think that distinction is really important because your mind might immediately pop to something like the Faces of Death series, which are, if I'm not mistaken, genuine footage of car crashes and, people dying under horrific circumstances, but they are not manufactured for the purposes of the film. They just are, caught and then put together in this macabre kind of collection.
Yeah, they're compiled.
There you
The
go.
perpetrators did not commit the acts that are being depicted.
Exactly.
These are executions, accidents, assassinations. So, yeah, they're real murders. They're genuine acts of violence on film. There are tons of examples. Like you said, in many cases, the deaths caught on tape may be accidental, or in the case of terrorist videos, the footage is made to fulfill an ideology rather than to sell something on the dark web. In the case of murderers and some serial killers, films are made entirely for one's own personal interest.
Right.
That's a dark pause, interest. But this is what causes fact-checking sites like our pals at Snopes to say there has never been a verified example of a genuine, commercially produced snuff film. So if you're looking for a snuff film example, or indeed an industry, Snopes argues, you will not find it because it simply does not exist.
Well,
How
and
do you
even
say
some
that?
of those decapitation type videos we're talking about, political killings, executions, those don't qualify because they're not done for that specific purpose. They're done for a political end, They're done for political reasons.
I just imagine the depths of things that are accessible, with the onion router and other things, the depths of stuff that exists online that we can't all access, right? That there are passwords for and all that other stuff. I don't know how you can say there isn't an industry because I don't know how we would have found it.
Right. This is the thing, and I'm glad you brought this up because this is why I personally, with great respect, disagree with Snopes. That may have been true in the past. Snuff films may have been an urban legend in times gone. However, the economy of scale combined with technological innovation means that the once expensive film equipment, the once expensive monopolized distribution routes are no longer a barrier. Stuff is more readily available, cheaper, and easier to use than ever before.
Well, even in 8mm, it's a entirely film-based process. It's an entirely, like, the collectors have to have projectors. It's like a very niche kind of thing, the way it's depicted. But
it's literally titled 8mm.
1,000,000%. And that is, of course, the grade of film that's used for more kind of low grade, kind of trashy type films, as opposed to 16 or 32mm. But once again, I can't recommend Red Rooms enough because, Matt, it delves into everything you're talking about. The password protection aspect of it, the using crypto to pay for it aspect of it, the what types of folks are in these chats, how does it work if you win the auction, how do you get verified, all of that stuff. And it is chilling and seemingly as accurate a depiction of this kind of world as could possibly be.
Yeah, but it does make me think about the days of VHS, the days when if you had, a cassette player and you had something to record that on, and you
little
could
handy cam,
and you could hand off tapes.
Totally.
Right? It wouldn't be.
That was
I think
lowering the
maybe-
barrier of entry in early days of handheld
Right,
VHS
exactly.
camcorders.
Yeah,
at the time.
that's what I'm saying.
Yep.
I'm just imagining. I think where I would agree with Snopes is that there could not be some massive,
Cash.
industry
Yes, right.
this, right?
It would be underground,
Yes.
probably regionally dependent, maybe back page ad kind of stuff. At
Yeah.
that point, before social media, because what we've seen now with technological innovation is this. I think it's important for us to make the positive point. There is an amazing renaissance of independent film and creators, people who could once upon a time never have had a voice, right? To have, or a platform to have their story told. Now they can distribute work all over the world. We're a huge fan of creators. All in all, that's a pretty swell time to be a film nerd, yet technology has no moral compass. And so along with all that great stuff that is coming from these new, frankly, superhuman abilities, there's a dangerous increasing opportunity for very messed up people to do very evil, unclean things and then capture it on film. This is a dark golden age for violent, genuine depictions of murder and torture and all sorts of unimaginable depravity. I mean, online feeds alone, they've long hosted death footage, terror propaganda, cartel murders, homicides captured on closed circuit television and then propagated. But those typically are for propaganda, intimidation, and documentation, not for direct retail.
Well, and then you have stuff that's like approaching this kind of thing. Like I think we've talked about McCamey Manor, the extreme haunted house situation.
I hate that.
Oh, it's despicable. And then there's a documentary about it. And this guy is clearly just an absolute
sadist,
perv and tool. And it's becomes very clear. Just if anyone doesn't know, this is you sign a waiver, you agree to be essentially abducted, and then put through the ringer of all kinds of despicable torture, not bodily injury per se, but psychological torture, being covered in cockroaches, waterboarded, things like that. But the implication when you're watching this documentary is that this dude is doing streams of it and is like selling these streams and or footage, because it's about as close as you can get to what we're talking about without killing somebody.
Yeah, possibly selling to betting rings.
Also true. Who's going to make it? That's the whole deal.
How far they'll make it. Yep. Yeah, and that's not a good haunted house because there's no implication of something supernatural. It's just people being very gross.
Yeah, I want to say there's even like a thing where they're supposedly a safe word, but they like don't honor your safe word.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy to that. And I think it's come up in a couple of other explorations
100%.
We've done. Yeah. So how about this? Let's together, you listening along at home, us here in the studio, look at some examples of verified depictions of murder and torture and see whether they fit that somewhat hair-splitting definition of stuff. State executions, right? Let's start there. The true definition of the state, spoiler, folks, is the entity that possesses a monopoly on violence. That's why it's legal in so many parts of the world during times of both war and peace for governments to execute people. Witnessing executions was part of the process way before the invention of motion cameras. Citizens gathered in public spheres, right? There were graphic drawings, woodcuts, paintings of executions in every imaginable method, burning at the stake, the guillotine, of course, hangings forever. And in some more modern cases, there's video footage of modern state-sponsored executions.
Well, I mean, like you said, Ben, the original, it was part of the bread and circuses of it all. Like that was entertainment. You would go and bring the family for a little picnic lunch and watch someone being beheaded or, sent to the guillotine or, the gallows.
Favorite weird apocrypha about guillotine deaths? Apparently there was a guy who, and this is probably not true.
Talked.
I like that one because it would be spooky, but that guy, there was one guy who apparently was able to get a hold of a pen and he traced a dotted line on the back of his neck and say, cut here.
That's funny.
Just to go out
Respect.
with, there is no humor like gallows humor. There is no whistle like a graveyard whistle. But the footage that we're seeing of the state-sponsored stuff is made for documentation, right? Because witnessing a state-sponsored execution, to your point, Noel, has always been very important to governments and hierarchies. Or it's made for intimidation. Don't do what this guy did, or this will happen to you.
Making an example.
Prove it. Just so. And then their advantage is it is political. It is a power grab, right? It is intimidation, but it is not made for economic gain.
It can be traded like that. It can be used that way by certain sick individuals who get a hold of it, but it does not meet the cut and dried qualifications for a snuff film.
Well, let's do the old record scratch here, Dylan, and jump to November 22nd, 1963. Anybody remember the Zapruder film?
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Yeah. Was that maybe state-sponsored execution?
Well, now that all depends on buddy.
And then think about the millions and millions of dollars that have been made on that moment and that film in particular being shown.
Yeah, but Zapruder didn't do it.
Well,
I know.
But to Matt's point, I think maybe what you're hitting at is like, it all depends on how deep the conspiracy goes and who was involved and what was the intent.
Yeah. We also, this reminds me of our serial killer memorabilia episode tangentially,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
When people who did not commit acts make a pretty penny profiting off that, right? So that's why we're calling the definition of snuff film somewhat legalistic.
I'm waiting
right?
for the 4K restoration of the Zapruder film.
I hope it happens. And where's the bonus footage, right?
100%. The making of.
Yeah.
I want to see the making of the moon landing with Kubrick's commentary. That'd be fun.
Yeah. What was that old joke? We had to fake the moon landing, but I'm an auteur, so we actually faked it on the moon.
Well, it's like a lot of people really truly thought that Christopher Nolan detonated a nuke, for Oppenheimer, yeah. Or at the very least, that's the kind of rumor that could get traction because of how committed he is to like doing the thing.
And let's continue with the record scratch, Dylan, if we could get another one. Perfect. Because we also see the line between what does or does not constitute a state execution is increasingly blurred. Matt, to your earlier point regarding the assassination of President Kennedy. The Wagner Group that you may recognize from some earlier episodes of Stuff They Don't Want You to Know has been, as of this year, found sharing videos of war crimes, including torture and homicide, via encrypted messaging apps like Telegram, and sometimes those are behind paywalls.
Jesus Christ.
So they are then, if something's paywalled, they're making some kind of profit from it, even if it's a small amount. But Wagner Group is also an arm of the Russian military. It gets sticky. Check out our episodes on them, but they're doing it for intimidation and propaganda purposes. I would suggest this still blurs the line between military activity, terrorism, and snuff films. And we know that a lot of evil people film murder.
Well, and you could also, there's that weird murkiness between, is it a state-sponsored execution if it's a terrorist group that perhaps has a little bit of underlying state support that maybe isn't front and center, like with the beheading of Daniel Pearl, the journalist. That was, I think, the one that my mind went to in terms of like one of those videos that was just out there.
That's a great point. And we could also walk that out a little further and ask about filmed cartel crimes and murders, because in some parts of the world, in Latin America, cartels have replaced the state in a very real way. So is that state-sponsored execution? It goes back to what is recognized as a legitimate regime in a given place. Conversations most recently circling that kind of stuff are the Taliban, which runs Afghanistan right now as we record. So is that a terrorist group? Is it a legit government? How close did Escobar come to being the state of Colombia, It
reminds me of when there was leaked cell phone footage of Muammar Gaddafi. I don't think it was his death. It was right after his death. But just when it was shown as a proof of state action, or, action against a leader that was once the head of the state. It's not the same thing. I think Saddam had something like that too. It was like after the execution, there was footage that was floating around.
Right, of either the defiled corpse or the discovery, right? Because Hussein was discovered hiding in a small compartment, and Gaddafi died in a purposefully humiliating way in a ditch.
And the group that abducted and murdered Daniel Pearl, Harkat ul Mujahideen, was a Pakistan-based Islamist jihadist group with links to Osama bin Laden and Mullah Omar. So there's, it's just sort of wheels within wheels. And how far do those spider webs kind of extend out into the state to the point where there is a crossover?
And how much does perspective have to do with all of that, right?
Right. Are you fighting for freedom or a greater good? It depends upon whom you ask, right? And if you think you're fighting for a greater good, that is a powerful rationalization for all sorts of inhuman things. And there's a story we'll share in a moment that I think could be an episode all its own in this milieu. Before we get to it, we gotta go back and say, obviously, the internet has blurred the definition, the previous non-internet definition of snuff. You know, you've got absolute monsters like Luca Magnotta or Vester Lee Flanagan II. Mass shootings have been filmed. Pretty much every imaginable crime has been live streamed at this point. And if it's live streamed, does that not mean that the platform upon which it is streamed makes some sort of profit?
At the very,
are they culpable?
Yes,
yeah.
Right. Well, and
what do you guys think?
Well, have you heard about all of the trauma that is experienced by folks who work for like the Twitters of the world and who have to literally comb through the content and flag these types of things? We've heard examples of people doing these jobs experiencing stuff that is very snuff adjacent.
Yeah.
And flagging it so it's removed from the platform.
Right. And that's a place where algorithms could actually be very helpful. CASM investigators have encountered similar trauma and have to be rotated out on a pretty regular basis just for their mental well-being and sanity. We know that social media, this is the dark side of the dopamine casino, right? We can go to Steve Lilliband, a journalist, educator, is the author of a book called The Devil's Cinema. And he has done a lot of research on Magnotta, that case in particular. And he says, look, this social media trend is powering a new trend in crime. There are murderers who document or broadcast their acts for nothing more than attention. They're not getting paid financially. They're getting paid in likes. They're getting paid in people looking at them. And I think that's a very dangerous thing.
So in the Magnotta case, the murderer engaged in editing. There's a certain, I don't know, stylization, I guess you could argue. He put a song on top of it. This led Fangoria, the aforementioned authority on all things splatter and horror, to call it, quote, the closest thing to a real snuff film. However, it was published for attention, not exclusively for a cash grab.
So money down the line, maybe, theoretically, could we call it that?
I guess it's about intention there, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
It's about the money or the message. Yeah. And these are very disturbed people we're discussing. If we go back to cartels and terrorist groups and some mass shooters, they film executions and torture. Whatever their specific ideology and goals, terrorist networks have long understood the propagandistic power of filming heinous acts, setting an example, forced confessions, beheadings, shootings, stabbing, strangulation. The list goes on. And this is one of the stories that I think could be an episode. Have you guys heard of William Francis Buckley?
No, I don't think I know this case.
So William Francis Buckley was a company man, CIA station chief. He was a big deal. And he was working in Beirut, where he got assigned as station chief in 1984. In 1985, he was kidnapped by Hezbollah, and he was tortured brutally for 15 months before his execution. During this time, Hezbollah sent at least 3 separate videos of the process that the CIA folks in Athens got a hold of. The disturbing things here are apparent, but one thing that a lot of people might miss is that the torturers are professionals. It is very difficult to keep somebody alive for 15 months while you're making their life a literal living hell and just not quite pushing them into the grave. He was injected with narcotics, from what analysts can tell, hallucinogens probably as well. He was blindfolded, chained, probably locked in a coffin for a lot of those months. And Hezbollah would continue sending Uncle Sam videos of this guy losing his mind, signing confessions, all the old, frankly, the torture tactics that the communists taught the world. And the difference between amateur and professional here might seem counterintuitive. Do check out our series on whether or not torture works. But the thing is, these guys, these people torturing the CIA station chief, they worked to keep him alive and to some limited degree lucid during the process. The odds are pretty high that Hezbollah also filmed Buckley's actual death, which we believe was probably an induced heart attack. They recovered his body when it was dumped in the road. The CIA has not acknowledged any footage of the actual death, but they have also not published the videos for obvious reasons. Horrific stuff. Probably an episode, but I don't think it fits the definition of snuff because as you were saying, you guys, the profit motive there is not financial. It's propaganda, intimidation.
Yeah, it makes you think of the stuff that the CIA has filmed and sent to people, you know? Because we know they like to be torturing people too, but they don't call it that.
Oh, yeah. Just enhance the interrogation and so on. Yeah.
And they love to keep people alive too.
Yes.
It's really gross. It's all really gross.
Agreed. This is a dark one for us, folks. We're actually, how about this? How about we take a break for a word from our sponsors, just to touch grass and catch some air before it gets even worse. Okay, we have returned. We hope everybody had a good commercial break. Believe it or not, it gets darker.
Cannibalism. Am I right? Sorry. Oh dear. Yeah, we already talked about Cannibal Holocaust, but this is a very different case. The case of a gentleman we've talked about on the pod numerous times, I believe, a notorious German cannibal and murderer by the name of Armin Muse, who in very recent years, March of 2001, murdered Bernd Brandes with his consent. Boy, oh boy, this gets complicated.
Yeah, let's do a disclaimer here as well. This is pretty graphic. Muse also, with, as you said, Noel Brand's consent, severed the man's penis. They attempted to eat it together. He killed Brands, again, as far as we can tell, with his consent. And he spent 10 months eating flesh from the cadaver. Muse is also a bit of a film enthusiast. Before his crimes, he filmed these videos of himself, really weird stuff. We have descriptions, but due to Germany's privacy laws, they've not been released to the public. Things where he would cover himself in ketchup and mime cutting himself without actually doing it.
There's actually quite a rich history, rich is maybe the wrong word, in German cinema as well of this type of thing. The Necromantic series is pretty much this kind of thing. It is obviously fictionalized. I believe the guy's name is Butgerag, and he's also made some other really, really intense Snuff-esque fictionalized. Some of them very high art and very interesting, if that's your bag. If you want to check some of it out. But yeah, a lot of German cinema, very niche, very horrific, that depicts a lot of the same kind of things that are being described here, Ben. Some real weird, kinky acts. Do you want to talk about the molding of the things into the things?
Yeah, he would hang himself by his feet with a block and tackle kind of situation, like you'd see a hog at a butcher shop, and then he would shape marzipan and minced meat into the shape of various human body parts, especially penises. He got in trouble with his mother when she found some of this stuff. He started keeping it in a safe. He was always active online looking for people who would help him fulfill this fantasy. And that's where he found Brandes after several false starts. He filmed that night. He filmed those horrific acts, and authorities found the footage. Again, it's not released to the public. Later, investigators said Muse is clearly unwell. You know, the question of consent is very difficult in this kind of case. And they said, above all, he is sexually motivated, not financially motivated. So as terrifying as his acts are, in the mind of authorities, by this definition, it doesn't qualify as a snuff film. And I've got to be honest with you guys. I'm sure we're all on the same page. This one really bothers me. It reminds me of our previous conversation about the definition of genocide, if we all remember that one.
Well, it's an ongoing debate to some anyway, right?
Right. Like, why is the UN so legalistic about this? Why is the idea of what does or does not constitute a snuff film, why is it hinging on this specific definition? After a certain point, you have to ask yourself, are they ignoring that innocent people have died? You know what I mean? Are we diminishing their lives by saying, oh, this is not quite the thing? I don't know.
It's interesting because, I mean, I'm not fully against the nature of the definition because the intent really does play a part. And it's sort of like definition of like maybe murder versus manslaughter or something.
Mm. Oh, yeah, I hear you. And I think that's a really good point, Noel. It's just, we all have strong stomachs. There are just some things that get to us, and having to be so deep in this is really, you know what? Folks, if you could, longtime listeners, do us a favor and just like email something nice, like a compliment or a joke or something happy after this, conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com, etc. We'll tell you how to get to us at the end. We also have to acknowledge that multiple serial killers have been tied to allegations of snuff films. Henry Lee Lucas, Otis Toole, Leonard Lake, Charles Ng, Carla Homolka, Paul Bernardo. The list goes on. Lucas and Toole, as we proved in previous episodes, were largely lying about things. And they were probably lying because they were telling investigators stuff they thought the authorities wanted to hear, which is part of the reason, interrogations can be so ethically fraught. We know that Ng and Lake, they filmed interactions with victims, but apparently they didn't film the murders themselves. So, we have worked extensively in this gruesome field of serial murderers and video or audience evidence of their crimes. Maybe throw it to you guys. Matt, Noel, I know we've all worked on investigations of this sort of stuff. Have you guys seen anything from a serial murderer that will qualify as an actual snuff film?
Not I, but Matt, I'm super interested in your work on the Lake and Ng stuff because that I was not aware of that case before you started getting involved in that, and I did not realize that how specific and was voyeuristic a lot of what they did was about.
First of all, to answer the question, I haven't seen anything that would be considered a snuff film if we're using profit still as our definition there, because
I haven't either. Yeah,
we're
not sure about that.
Specifically, Leonard Thomas Lake and Charles Ng they killed a lot of people, a lot of men that they generally didn't do this other process with, which included enslaving someone, keeping them. I would use the R word, raping them, torturing them, and they would kill them. They would take video footage of that process, most of that process, and it was recovered when both men were eventually arrested and the place where they were doing this stuff was raided.
Due to Ng's kleptomania.
Yeah.
Enough.
He was trying to steal a vice out of the store, and he got caught. And there's previous weapons charges. There's a book called Die for Me that actually Scott gave this one to me because he was a big
Scott Benjamin of Car Stuff.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of books you can read on those guys if you're into this kind of stuff. But I would not recommend trying to make a whole story on it. We ended up not making that show, by the way.
It was just too much.
It was too much. Yeah.
It's dark, especially looking at Lake's inspirations and the fact that he was lucid. We know he was lucid because he committed suicide. He took the cyanide pill when he knew the hammer was coming down. So this was not someone who was hallucinating.
Yep.
But we don't know whether or not they would have, if the technology was available at the time, would they have gone onto a gore site or a dark web and tried to make some profit?
I certainly don't know, but I don't think so. That was, I mean, the dude, you can read all about this. The guy, Leonard, was obsessed with this thing called The Collector, and you could go deep into all of that. And so it was definitely a personal thing.
It was a hellish fantasy and an aspiration that he wanted to create that world in real life.
You got to wonder too, in some ways, how like the popularization of stuff like the Saw films and the Hostel films, and of course, a lot of the underground stuff that we're talking about as well. Like, is there a world where that stuff existing is almost like, I don't know, some sort of balm for people that might commit those types of crimes? Did they not have access to sort of like stand-in material? I'm not doing a very good job of saying what I'm trying to get across.
No, I hear you.
It's sort of like essay, depictions and the idea of a lot of pornography where all the actors are of age, but they maybe pretend to not be. And this idea of these materials existing, is that something that will keep people from committing these crimes, or is it something that will make them more likely to commit these crimes?
That will galvanize them.
I wonder about that sometimes.
It's a question that's very difficult to answer. And a lot of, we always go to the scientists before we go to the politicians, right, on this show. So there's been a lot of psychological research into exactly what you're asking, Noel, and unfortunately the answer is still not conclusive. We don't know the entirety of the mechanisms. We do know that in all the above cases we've discussed, these horrific acts did occur. They are on film. Some are even live streamed, but still investigators will say they don't fit the definition of actual snuff, and they'll agree with Snopes. But our dark news for this evening, Conspiracy Realist, is that this may have changed just last month thanks to some stunning work by a journalist named Ben Ditto over at Vice.
Yeah, man, this popped up and I was like, okay, here we are. Because I'm fascinated by this stuff. Like, I keep bringing up 8mm. That was a movie that really, like, okay, this is something that maybe exists, and I've been fascinated by it ever since. And this may well be the first example of a quote unquote real snuff film.
Yeah, agreed. One more disclaimer. The next few minutes of this podcast are not appropriate for all audience members.
For anyone, frankly.
Do we even have to say? Ugh, this is horrifying.
It's real bad.
Well, we owe people the truth.
I think it's true. Yeah, and you can read the article if you want more of the details. So I think, Ben, you've sort of spared us. Yeah, you condensed it a little bit, but there's a film that surfaced, and as Ditto reveals in his article, it's a video that started making the rounds through Telegram and other encrypted apps back in July of 2025, known colloquially, I guess, or in these circles as the Vietnamese butcher video. And he writes that the video shows a man lying on his back in a tiled room, pleasuring himself. At a point that he reaches orgasm, a second man decapitates him with a meat cleaver and a few very expert strokes, as he describes it, then drags the head off the body. And that man is wearing an Adidas tracksuit and a Guy Fawkes type mask. And he's being very slow and intentional with his movements. And the victim, much like the German case that we talked about, Ben, seems to be in on it, is not crying or begging for their life or struggling in any way. Yeah.
And Ben Ditto, we want to thank you because you did excellent work. We're not just summarizing this article. I went through Telegram and delved into the case further, and it genuinely got to me. It genuinely weirded me out, and I don't really want to talk about it, but again, we owe you the truth, folks. The video does continue, and it shows the decapitation from various angles, and then it shows the dismemberment of the cadaver, including things like removing the intestines from the remainder of the body. And then it's followed by these unexplained images of
food.
Yeah.
The implication being perhaps that there was some culinary twist to the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. And we haven't verified what that unidentified meat could be, but there's clearly, to your point, Noel, an intention on behalf of the filmmakers, right, to imply cannibalism. And then there's bonus content, other gore sites, things like Motherless and so on. We don't want to mention a bunch of these because they're not worth looking at. They platformed a longer version of the butcher footage in which the executioner and the victim appear to do a rehearsal, a dry run. They're slowly walking through the motions of the murder that later occurs. So thanks again to Ben Ditto, who verified this footage and said, yes, these iterations, the original and the other stuff, were likely sold online for commercial gain, making it what he calls, quote, the first bona fide snuff film to find its way out in the world. And this is an unsolved case as we're recording.
Do we know anything about the identity of the victim?
We do. Yeah, we do know. Yes, I would say yes. Both men appear to be speaking with a regional accent there in Vietnam, and the brands of everything depicted on camera have been identified, even down to the physical store that sold the tiles on the floor. So people are working here. They haven't found the exact location. Central Vietnam, northern, maybe across the border in Cambodia. They haven't found that.
And there's even a tattoo visible.
Yeah, on the executioner's side. The victim, to your question, is we believe it's a guy named Nguyen Jean Dat. Pardon my pronunciation. He had quite a history in these gore communities.
Yeah, participating in a lot of these extreme message boards, had the handle dot beheading. He also had accounts on numerous other forums that discuss and trade in these types of things.
Yeah. And he even went on dating sites and referenced wishing to be beheaded, having a death wish. Journalists, online sleuths alike are fairly confident this is the victim. To the murderer, things get, if you're looking at identifying the murderer, things are much more murky. Like you said, we know he's male. He has a tattoo that reads 13-9. And there is speculation to his identity, but it's very loose. It's not really holding water. We do know that apparently the person claiming to be the murderer has control over Dot's Facebook profile.
Wow.
Yeah, there's not an upside to this one.
Well, the upside is there now exists this thing called AI, and you can generate real up stuff like that now.
Jesus,
that
man,
you don't actually have
that.
to kill anybody, which is,
Right.
hey, that's nice.
Well, and that
cherry
kind of,
on the top.
Well, that sort of intersects into my question, whereas like, is there a world where that's better than the alternative, or what does it mean, like existentially speaking? I don't have the answer. I don't know. Right.
Like fictionalized depictions or drawings of CASM,
Right.
Does
right.
It's very dark stuff. I mean, this case in Vietnam or in Cambodia may well be solved as amateur researchers, journalists, and local law enforcement are continuing their grisly but righteous mission to figure out what's happening. I don't know, guys, as we wrap up, again, I'm keeping it together for this one. We have to ask what this teaches us. It teaches us that snuff film started as an urban legend, a made-up campfire tale, and it was culturally tied to humanity's unceasing fascination with things dark and unclean, but combined with new technological capability, just like how large data models have created the ability to see into the future, right? Or may create telepathy. Technology turned this into a real thing. I think that's fair to say. And I'm really not chill about acknowledging that. I don't know if you guys would agree.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. That it's not
I still think it's something that's been around forever. I don't think we're ever going to be privy to the actual depravity that exists in some corners of.
I agree with that too. And I mean, one thing that the internet does is it just enhances and magnifies and like, just what's the word I'm looking for? Exacerbates any pre-existing kink and or fetish and or perversion, and just what you want. How specific do you want to get? There it is. It's there if you know where to find it.
Yeah, well put. The way I always like to say it is, the question is, are there more skeletons in closets now, or does civilization just possess better flashlights? Yeah. And that may be the case.
I mean, I keep going back to in my mind, I keep going back to the George Floyd video and thinking about that, trying to wrap my head around it as a snuff film. And I remember people talking about it as a snuff film when it came out, when the footage was, released, when all of the onlookers who were shooting footage, when the police cameras were released, when the footage inside the Cup Foods where he was before that was released, where you get to watch this man get killed, right? And just how many outlets covered it extensively, how much of that footage was shown, how many of us just watched it, and for various reasons, mostly, again, as I said at the top, for solidarity, but we were fascinated. We watched it, right? How many times we've watched the 9/11 footage over and over and over again, where there are hundreds of people getting killed every, second of that footage. You're just watching death.
It's impossible to parse out and drill down into every one of those motivations when you're watching a thing like that, right? Because like on the one hand, yeah, you have a reason you're watching it, solidarity, wanting to understand, wanting to be part of like this moment and experience that for good reasons. But then the mechanics of our psyche, stuff going on, it's, yeah.
Think about the forest fire that was the Charlie Kirk footage that went out. The stuff that wasn't covered by national news media, but went out on social media and was just streamed over and over and over again of a man dying.
I've gone out of my way to avoid that, by the way. I have not seen it and have no interest in looking for it. I don't know if you guys happen to catch it by accident or on purpose, but I've really tried to not see that stuff.
I feel like it's part of the job to not turn away on my end, and that's this leads us to the third and perhaps worst aspect here. What we're seeing is not a case really of legalistic definitions, nor is it a case of one-off maniacs. This is a trend enabled and powered by technology, along with very old human impulses. So until something changes, and we don't know the answer, this trend may well continue. Is it something where we need government to be able to clamp down on people posting via encrypted messaging apps, right? Or wherein there is no anonymous internet such that these criminals and these monsters can be caught? I think part of the answer, honestly, goes into capitalism. If we're talking about the real definition of a snuff film as far as something evil made for profit, people will be murdered. They will be tortured. They will be defiled on camera. It's going to happen. It's happening now. The footage will, in a capitalistic society, end up being monetized in some way. And I'm not sure how that can be stopped.
Well, yeah. Think about all of those examples we were just talking about. Though the footage of all that stuff ends up on news sites that have ads running on them. That when you have something horrifying that happens like that and there's footage of it, then if you host a site that can show video, you are going to make buku-oodles of money because of the number of clicks that are going to occur, the number of eyes that are going to be on it, the number of times it gets shared. Is it better morally or worse if it's not exclusively made for a profit, but it ends up making a crap load of profit? I don't know the answer to that, but it feels like we're in a world where that is just the reality.
Yeah. I think there's just shades of worse in all of this, right? I don't know if there's better or, yeah, no, I'm with you, Matt.
And with this, we can say that in this case, our good friends at Snopes may be incorrect because of all these recent events, even if we're going with the legalistic definition of snuff films. The trend the continuation, that is the stuff they don't want you to know. Be safe out there, folks. Thanks for hanging with us. Check in with us. Let us know how you're doing in your neck of the global woods. You can give us a call. You can send us an email. You can find us online.
Yep. You can find us at The Handle Conspiracy Stuff on Facebook with our Facebook group, Here's Where It Gets Crazy, on X, FKA, Twitter, and on YouTube, where we have video content galore for your enjoying purposes. On Instagram and TikTok, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show.
We have a phone number. It is 1-833-STDWYTK. It's a voicemail system. You've got 3 minutes. Give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. If you'd like to send us an email, we are
the entities that read each piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. And honestly, fellow listeners, not joking, having a tough time today. So if you want to send something nice, what the internet calls eye bleach, you want to give a dumb compliment, whatever, it'd be great to hear from you. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.